So hi everyone, I have a special guest with me today for this video. We are going to be talking about what dissociative identity disorder is and the differences between that and schizophrenia and how they're often confused. And so we're going to be shedding more light on what exactly dissociative identity disorder entails. And so I have a very, very special guest. We have AnnaLynne McCord joining us today. Hi, AnnaLynne.
Hi, how are you, Lauren?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm great.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experiences with dissociative identity disorder. I guess just to start off, can you give us a little bit of background information about who you are and when you were diagnosed and whatnot?
Absolutely. So I, as people would identify me in the world, am an actress. That's the least identifying aspect of me now, but that's what people know me as. And I was living with DID for a very long time with no awareness. It was only 3 years ago that I was in treatment for childhood sexual abuse, PTSD. And I kept referring to parts of myself as she and her and they. And when they do this, she does this and she does that. And then I kept apologizing to my doctor and saying, I'm sorry, I know this is weird that I keep saying she is doing this and it's technically me, but it's not really me. I don't know how to be who she was. I don't feel like I'm her. And my doctor just smiled at me with the sweetest, most understanding smile. And she was like, she treats only women and always for domestic and sexual abuses. And so she deals specifically with individuals like myself who have suffered severe PTSD and are trying to cope with that. So in order to treat my post-traumatic stress disorder, I was told by others who have suffered what I've gone through to check out EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So she's an EMDR specialist and a PhD and all the things. And so she's seen it all. But she just smiled at me with this maternal, knowing smile. And she said, yeah, pretty much all of my patients, have a version of this and are on the spectrum of it. And at some point or other will refer to parts of themselves as other than the way they see themselves. And I can't tell you the relief of just feeling like, okay, this is not entirely weird, but it would be as crazy as me referring to I and speaking on behalf of you and things that you've done. Like that was how difficult it was for me to imagine referring to my alters as me, even though in my mind they look just like me at different ages or different, in different energies.
Right.
So that was 3 years ago. And that was the beginning of me realizing that I've actually lived with this for a very long time.
Right. Okay, wow. So you kind of got into a little bit about what it feels like, but can you give us a bit of a definition, I guess, about what exactly DID is?
Absolutely. So dissociative identity disorder, unfortunately, was formerly known as multiple personality disorder, which it no longer is referred to as that because that's a terrible way to depict it. It is not what it is. And the DSM has never appropriately apologized for what they did to sufferers by labeling it multiple personality disorder. And my industry has never apologized for misrepresenting DID in such an atrocious way on so many different films and projects. Hopefully, we're moving into an era where there's less of that. But for those of you who either have no idea what this is or have heard of its former reference, multiple personality disorder, and would like to know the truth, dissociative identity disorder, DID, is a fragmenting of identities of yourself. So I describe it, I have a set of mirror, I have the perfect mirror behind me. It's a mirror with a lot of sections, but if you look at yourself in a mirror, you're just one person. But if someone takes a hammer and smashes the center of the mirror, suddenly there's 100 images of you reflected back to you, right? Because of the now separated little compartments that each shard is in. That's what it's like to experience DID. DID is a fragmenting of the identities. It often, most frequently, starts and is a result of severe abuses or traumas early on in life. The most intelligent brains, my doctor said, so you can feel good about yourself, everybody out there suffering with DID. The most intelligent of brains split the most. And it is a protective mechanism that the brain automatically, people don't choose this, another myth, automatically does to protect the individual to survive. And survival is not about quality of life. Survival is about not dying. So it is a mechanism that is put into place. For example, because I was so young when I was experiencing these severe abuses, and I was under the belief based on the adult who was abusing me that I would die, that I would be killed, or people that I cared about would be killed. It was imperative that I could still be a child at times. So parts of me broke off into the child part that played on playgrounds. And the other part was the abused one who was terrified of her existence. And it was a protective mechanism so that I could actually keep living. So that is what DID is, and as the most encompassing way that I can explain it to encompass and go over all the aspects of what it's like to experience it and to understand it.
No, I think that was an amazing explanation and a really great distinction to clarify that, like, this is a protective mechanism that your brain is doing, which is amazing. But, I think a lot of people have this conception that, multiple personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder is, all these like wild, different personalities that someone exhibits. But really, it's just parts of you along your life that are coming out in specific ways as a means of protecting yourself, which is really kind of amazing, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think what a lot of people would wonder is, how have you managed your DID while being an actress? Or what has that, been like, playing characters and living with DID? What has that been like?
Well, I think in a way you become DID to be an actress.
I guess, yeah.
I've become a bunch of different people. I become what you actually think DID is. But no, because I didn't know I had it, and this is something that I think people really need to understand. I thought I was in a different mood. How I perceived myself versus how I was perceived by the outside world, by individuals interacting with me, by close loved ones and intimate partners, was very different because they felt the energy shift. And that shift is as profound as someone else walking in the room. And that's where the confusion happens, right? That it's, a whole nother personality. And it's not, because at any given moment, I can throw you, Lauren, into several different situations, and you will speak in a different voice tone. You will express in a different body language based on what you're subject to. For example, if I put you in a situation where there's a small child in front of you and a car is about to hit the child, you might become super aggro. You might not be aggro in real life, but you might make an aggressive heroic move to knock that kid out of the way and, hey, to alert the driver. And you can become really powerful and really intense. And maybe that's not how you express in your daily life. And so that's why it's easy as someone suffering and with unawareness to think that you're in a different mood.
Right.
This is why I, again, distinctly separate someone who has fluidity with their moods and someone who feels what they're feeling so strongly that they can't actually shift into anything else but that. Mm-hmm. And that is what I was dealing with. I didn't know it. So when I was on set, I just became someone else. And then I was at a new set with new people, and no one would ever know because that crew and those cast members and those producers are all on a different project. What was interesting, and this is when I started to notice it, there were two aspects. So there was an independent film that I did called Excision, and I talk about this a little bit in regards to having an awareness that I was doing something a little bit more than acting when it came to my roles. I wrapped this film where I play this disturbed, delusional, homicidal little teenager. I wrapped that production at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, and on Wednesday at noon, I had to be on 90210 as this happy beach blonde bombshell who's funny and comedic, and I couldn't find her because I was dark and I didn't know how to get out of it. And I went to my producing director after a few takes and I was like, that was shit. That was terrible. Don't use that. Don't use that. And then finally I was like, Stuart, I forgot how to act. And he's like, you didn't forget how to act. You're fine. I'm like, no. I've been playing this character. This is season 4 of 90210. I've played this character for, nearly 100 episodes. I know this character. She was gone and I couldn't get her back. And that was a window into the fact that I was a little bit different. I didn't know anything about what I was going to discover years later, but that was the first kind of inclination that there was something that I didn't fully understand about even me, my process, or my way of acting.
Right.
And the other thing I would say that really stuck out, and I noticed more specifically after I had my diagnosis, was the director of that film. I've gone on to do several films with him, and we become friends. And whenever I'm around him, I have a tendency to shift into the me I was when I was on that first movie with him. It's almost that he activates my need to be Pauline, was the character's name. And this is interesting because when I met him, I was under threat. So I wanted this role very badly, and he made it very clear to my team that he did not want to meet me, that he did not think I could do this role. And he was like, I don't want to meet some 90210, blonde babe. Like, this is a serious character that I need the demographic to really feel that they're being represented correctly, and I'm not doing it. I'm not just hiring this chick who wants to, do an indie and be all like edgy. So I showed up at our lunch because the little bugger, he really wasn't going to meet me, but his producer owed my agent a favor. And he had to sit down with me. So we went to lunch, and as I'm walking up to the table, he's just like, I can just tell he's stewing. He does not want to be there. He's 26 years old. This is his first movie ever. He's as arrogant as the day is long. And he's just like, no, she is not it. I'm not hiring this idiot. So I sit down, and I've had my makeup artist come and put these like weird bushy eyebrows on me. I was like, what's going to alter my face and make me look a little, strange or whatever, just to try. And he's just looking at me like, you're just a pretty chick with eyebrows on. Like, no way. I brought pictures of me when I was a weirdo little kid with my mid-calf socks and my boys' t-shirts. I was like, I'm going to prove that I am a strange person, and you're going to freaking hire me, man. And then he tells me, oh, well, Pauline, the character, has to shave her head. And I was like, I'll shave my head. And he's like, no, you won't. You're a 90210 little Hollywood starlet. You're not going to shave your head. I was like, I will shave my head. And he's like, no, you won't. You're on your show. And I was like, they can wig me. I will shave my head for the movie. And he would not believe me. And I got pissed, and protective mechanism popped up. I grabbed my steak knife and started to saw off my hair at the table at Houston Steakhouse. He goes, whoa, okay, stop. Hold on. You're crazy. All right. Don't cut your hair off at the table. And I had an offer once I had gotten in the car, and he realized that this woman is crazy. But there was a threat mechanism that had been activated at that table where I had to be this audacious, like devil may care, go fuck yourself, which was definitely has maintained itself for a long part of my life. But that had to come out and couldn't be anything else.
That's so
I wasn't
interesting.
allowed to be anything else.
Yeah.
And when I've been around him, I've had to navigate that she wants to show up and suppress everything else. And I'm not just that anymore. I'm compassion and love and a lot of things now that I didn't feel at that time for myself. And it's interesting to dance with her.
Right. So I think that's probably something that a lot of people wonder is if you have the choice to kind of move between these alters, or if it's more or just always triggered by some kind of stress stimulus, or what is that like?
Well, it differs as you evolve with the disorder. So in order for people to understand this, and this is how my brain works, by reverse engineering, I take the bed apart and get back to the very first screw, and then I know how to put the bed together. So that's what I did with my brain. I didn't physically take my brain apart, but I went in there and dug around for a long time until I could understand what was happening with me. And even prior to my diagnosis, I was doing this with all of my defense mechanisms and my aversion to love and my inability to have intimacy and a lot of things that I struggled with for a long time. Everything comes back down to two very simple things. One is real, one's an illusion. Love is real, fear is an illusion. This is what our world is made of. And when you're talking about mental health concerns, where there are more concerns, there is more fear. Where there are less concerns, there is more love. I did not have the glue to put those fragmented mirror shards together to have a whole image of myself. I have a wellspring of overflowing glue now. I have so much love. So I don't get stuck in a different identity. I can fluidly move through them. I can ask them to pop out. One of them wanted to not integrate with me, and she made it very clear that she wanted to, this was in December of 2020, she wanted to go away and never come back. And that was hard because I didn't know I had this. Then I discovered that I had it 3 years ago. Then it was like I had a family, and I was very ostracized at the time from my own family, and no one really understood what I was going through. And I was like, my doctor was so accepting of me saying, well, she and I are together and we are hanging out in my brain. And all my family is like, you're in psychosis, you're insane. And like, not all of my family, but certain people. And I just felt very, very seen for the first time by my amazing doctor. And then I would go out in the world and I wasn't seen like that. And it was very difficult to toe that line. And so the evolution of this is that now with more scaffolding on the inside of me, more treatment, more work, hours and hours and hours, days and weeks and months and months and months of this treatment that I've undergone, coinciding with somatic experience to release trapped energy out of my cells, out of my body that would initiate threats that weren't there, the perception of threat that wasn't there. I now have the ability to manage what would be considered identities much more like moods, the way people who are neurotypical do. So, for example, last week I had two people that I was speaking with who both have childhood sexual trauma. They were, one I was doing an inner child deep dive practice with, and the other I've been working with for a while, and she just called me and her face was little, and you can tell. I can tell anyway. I can tell when someone is in a younger identity, especially because it really presents on the face. And I immediately said, do you need little Anna? And I said, I can pop her out. And I was able to help this wonderful woman who's navigating this and raising a child and trying to figure out, how to live life and convince herself that she's not crazy, even though she feels she is. And I have no shame whatsoever. I'm like, okay, little Anna's here. And little Anna went to work and little Anna started to talk to her. And immediately she just started crying, and little Anna told her how scary things had been. And little Anna told her that she had figured out how to not be scared of the monsters anymore. And she has a lot of help from Big AnnaLynne. And she just went right into it and intuited what this lovely woman needed at the time. And their littles were able to, my little and her little were able to have a healing moment. The same thing happened with the other young woman. So yeah, it's a very different experience now. And I really want to express, because there has been no material out there in the world that you can integrate fully and at some point be in a space where you don't feel that you lose control over your alter switches. And I, in personal experience, I can say that you can. You absolutely can. If I could do it, there's a possibility, and it required a lot of love. And that's the part that we're often missing.
I think that's a wonderful point to make in terms of really dealing with any mental illness, in terms of how best to approach, healing and whatnot. Yeah. So you call this integration.
Yes.
That's not talked about very much in terms of dissociative identity disorder. So it's so nice that you brought this up as a possibility for anyone out there living with dissociative identity disorder and maybe struggling with it.
Absolutely. I mean, I've never heard anyone speak about it, and I saw it. Like my experience is very visual with my alters. I was in a moment, I had a very, a blast of love that happened between me and a partner. And he just doubled down on something that I was so nonchalant about it. It was like, I didn't even see a problem. My image of myself had clearly been so low that I didn't see why someone would stay with someone if they were this, this, and this. And I was saying that, I was expressing that. And he got in my face, like he was emotional and intense. And he was like, I would never leave you. Like, I would not leave you in that situation. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, this is a really extreme situation. Here are the factors. And he's like, I would not leave you. And he got it was like his emotion overtook me. And I went from just being very logical about, no, this is why you should definitely leave me if I was ever to be in this circumstance, to which was clearly one of my parts of myself that arose to protect me from the pain of being abandoned. And he was like, And I went from this just clearly locked and loaded in my, that I call her analytical. She was a very analytical. She was just processing, just not able to be in emotions, and it wasn't safe. And she does not leave. Like, when she was there, she had the reins, and it was like, it could be weeks or months. Like, nobody gets her out of her role. And he did. And something broke. Something that needed to be broke inside me, and something healed in its place. And it knocked me out. Like, I went into hysterics, and then I passed out and had a nap, which is also very common when you disassociate, to fall asleep or to feel the need to go to sleep when you're losing space and time. As I was waking up, I always check in with my alters. I always check in with my alters to make sure that everyone's there. Like, I started thinking of them as someone hanging out in my house. It's just my mind house. And I'm like, you would ask them, hey, how'd you sleep? How was your nap? And I had woken up from the nap, and I went to check in the room in my mind where they always are. And there they were. And I told them, I want to introduce you guys to somebody. And in my mind, I did something that my doctor and I do a lot, which was resourcing. So in memories, when I was dealing with really difficult memories, before we would go all the way into them to process with EMDR, we would go in and resource. So I would go back to the place and time in my mind, but I would bring like an army of AnnaLynne, like, we gonna knock some people out. You try to mess with little Anna, or I would bring in, my cat, something that would make me feel, happy, or someone who made me feel protected. Protection, love, safety, happiness, energy are all forms of anchoring and resourcing that my doctor would teach me to do. And then we would go into the scary memories. So I started to do that of my own volition in my meditation or in quiet time, or now I could just do it with my eyes open. I could like create this safety space by bringing in the image of someone. But right after this happened, I wanted to introduce this gentleman to my others in my mind. And I went in the room with everybody, and it was the craziest thing because, I had probably 75 splits that I could see. I couldn't count all of them at 6 years old. Like they were all like, it was like I had a definitive 13-year-old self. I had a definitive infant self. And then I had just like a sea of 5 and 6-year-olds for as far as you could see in this room inside my mind. And they were all just probably splitting constantly because that was the period when I was really going through all the severe traumas. Mm-hmm. So what was really interesting was he walked in the room in my mind, and my mind, I see him as myself. I'm the POV, the me that I feel is me. And he never looked at anyone else but me. And he, like the little ones were all running, and he was picking them up, and all these things were happening in my mind, but he never stopped looking at me. And all of a sudden I realized I didn't have to be a little girl and play baby. I didn't have to, my brain was making this realization that it didn't have to feel threat, that if I wasn't cutesy and little and adorable, I would lose the guy's attention or his adoration or whatever. Affection. It was like the energy of what I had just experienced was visually transmitting in my mind a message to me that I was enough. And when that clicked in, you can imagine the tears. My heart is beating so hard right now. 75 little me's just sucked up into me, and the room was empty. Wow. And I looked around and I'm like, wait, what just happened? But I was just like fixed on him and me. And then I fell asleep again because this is a lot for your body to process when you're processing an epiphany of love, that you actually are lovable and that someone could actually care about you without you having to be a bunch of other things to keep them. And when I woke up again, I went to go to the room, and now the room was gone. Like the room started to, I couldn't create the room. I couldn't get it back. It was gone. And it was disintegrating. That was just dust in my mind. I mean, this is so trippy that you're like, this is your own mind. I'm like, I have an incredible imagination. I'm an actress. I'm a writer. I can create worlds. My mind does what I tell it to do. When this is going on, this is a life of its own. And this is something that's really, everyone has a different experience. You might have visual, you might have impressions and senses or smells that make you kind of notice your shift is occurring. But for me, it was very visual in my mind. I called my doctor immediately, and I was like, the room is gone. The little one sucked up into me. I don't know what's happening. Where are they? They went all the way. I need to find them. They're missing. I need to put out a search order for my littles. And she's like, wait, tell me what happened. And I told her I just explained the same thing that I was just telling you. And she said, oh my goodness, you integrated. Wow. You integrated. And what I do want to share about that quickly is that happened. And then I didn't feel fully solid in the integration. And I also felt a little lonely all of a sudden. It happened so fast. So I consciously popped back out my 13-year-old self and my 6-year-old self, like my most definitive 6-year-old self. So we were down to now 3. And in this space, I felt safe to move forward because this first integration is amazing, but it's not like, and they lived happily ever after the end, I still have muscle memory. I still have deeply dug grooves in my brain of neural associations and neural pathways that are associated with being altered and compartmentalized and fragmented. And that burst of love, which I felt, was some glue. And it allowed me to glue a lot of the me's back into me. But there was still work to do, and to make sure that that glue was really firmly cemented, and that it wasn't coming from an outside source.
Right. Yeah.
That was key. So I was getting love from an outside source, and love heals no matter what. but the love that keeps you healed is the love that comes from within. So I wouldn't go on to find that level of integration until just in the last 6 months.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. That was like a beautiful story.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned like, finding that place of self-love within the last 6 months. And I think that that's kind of what I could find on the internet anyway, about when you started to be open about your diagnosis. Is that kind of why you decided to be open, or what was that process like to become more open about it?
You're the first one to put that together, actually.
Okay.
Even beyond me. I didn't realize that, but probably it was an organic, because I was in an organic conversation with Dr. Daniel Amen at his office, super comfy setting. It was just me and him, and he's like, hey, can we turn some cameras on? I do a YouTube show. And I was like, of course. And I was just talking like I would talk to someone, at the dinner table or anything like that. So I clearly was at a comfort level to be able to share it. It's just a normal conversation with someone that I didn't really know that well. He was a doctor, so it probably felt a little bit easier. But when he said he wanted to share it, there was no resistance. I didn't feel any fear. So maybe that is why. So thank you for highlighting that.
Yeah.
But so you talk about living with schizophrenia and this kind of, I would love to like cross-pollinate a little bit. I mean, obviously your listeners know your journey, but how is it different or similar or whatever to what I'm explaining?
Yeah. So I didn't know a lot about dissociative identity disorder, so I didn't know really the commonalities or differences that there are. But do people, ever confuse dissociative identity disorder with schizophrenia for you when you tell them?
Have I been called schizophrenic? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I thought it was just more of an asshole thing, but it definitely is people's ignorance, lack of knowledge, and lack of information that's accessible. So conversations like this really help.
Yeah, you mentioned that some of your family members thought that you were just in psychosis when you were experiencing the splits and whatnot. And so perhaps that's kind of a similarity in terms of the presentation of it. But I think the root of what is happening is very, very different. And so understanding that, like, psychosis is not necessarily like a dissociation and parts of you that are coming out. I think it's really more just like you're losing touch with reality. But it sounds like, you are very much still grounded within reality, just maybe triggered by different things and experiences.
Oh, absolutely. My doctor was like, how about they let me stick to the diagnosis of what you have, since I'm the doctor here. And I was like, oh my God, I love you. She was much nicer about it, but she delicately reminded me, your family members, I'm assuming don't have doctorates. So where did they get the information to diagnose you with psychosis? I do have one, and I am not diagnosing you with psychosis, and I see you 3 to 4 times a week. So we're going to go with that. So no. So yes, she was very quick to correct that assessment of me. But yes, the assumption was that I was losing touch with reality because of my safety within myself and with my doctor, to be able to refer to myself as me and my little selves as she and her, and feel very separate and okay in that. And I think that it was so hard to hear for certain people that they just like, you need help, you need to be inpatient. Like, it was like they wanted to admit me. And my doctor is like, I speak to you every day. Like, and we do treatment for 90 minutes, 3 times a week. You're completely grounded in reality, and you're more grounded than you have been in the last, however many months of treatment. So yes, that was definitely people will be people.
Yeah. I thought it was also interesting that you mentioned kind of before you knew what you were experiencing, that it felt like you were like fluctuating between moods, which could probably be, a similar experience, although again, very different what is actually happening to, like schizoaffective disorder, which is a combination of bipolar or depression or whatnot. So maybe that mood experience, the way it presents to other people, might be similar as well. But again, actually very different, because you weren't fluctuating between moods. You were fluctuating between different, parts of you.
Different parts of me initiated by protective mechanisms. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, I don't know. I think that that's kind of the similarities that people think between DID and schizophrenia really are actually nothing alike. And so
Nothing
it's
alike, yeah.
weird that, people confuse these two so frequently because, a lot of people for
It's
me,
very strange.
if I share that I have schizophrenia, they're like, "Oh, so how many personalities do you have?" And it's like, that's not even a good question for anyone, first of all, but
Well, I would love to be more educated on how to answer that question, because people assume that if you have a severe mental health concern, that you know everything about all severe mental health concerns.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, I'm not. I just know what I live with. But how does it differentiate for you if I'm faced with that in the future? That I
like
could
a question
differentiate?
about if you have or what schizophrenia entails.
Or just like a day in the life of like a moment. I'm kind of explaining obviously moments where my DID has presented.
Yeah.
What does your schizophrenic tendencies present as?
Yeah, so
do
typically
you have it? Is it thoughts or feelings, impressions, or?
it's typically like so there's like the positive symptoms, so like hallucinations and delusions that you experience. And I experience those while on medication too. I get breakthrough symptoms like that. But I think probably the harder symptoms that I experience on a daily basis are the like delusional thoughts or the paranoia. And so it's kind of where you follow this narrative within your mind that isn't necessarily grounded in reality. And you kind of, float between reality and, delusional thought or paranoia about things that maybe shouldn't necessarily be bringing that up.
Yeah.
But, I thought it was so lovely what you were saying about, love and self-acceptance being a huge component of your recovery. And I think that that is very applicable for schizophrenia as well in terms of, obviously I'm not saying that you can heal yourself by with love and whatnot. Like that's not what I'm saying. And I don't think that's what you were saying either, but it's a huge, huge step forward in terms of learning how to manage your illness and how to, operate from a place of self-love and self-acceptance, which is just huge. So I love that you shared that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think about the fact that I was diagnosed as bipolar. I later was told by Dr. Amen, who scanned my brains and who had this initial conversation that became the public conversation that I would go on to further about me having DID. He said, I've scanned thousands and thousands, like 50,000 bipolar brains. You don't have a bipolar brain. But I was diagnosed with it because I had the symptoms and I have family history. Right. And what's interesting about that to me is that bipolar is realized in teenage years, typically. It remains dormant till teenage years. And it often is activated by some form of trauma. So the question then lies in, if you are bipolar and that is activated, would it have been avoided if you grew up with love? That to me is a curious thing to discover, because if what activates it is probably what is the opposite of love? Trauma. I think that not a lot of love is centering around those abuses and stuff, So it's interesting to me to think about it. So again, in reverse engineering my own experience and my own feelings, going through piece by piece, memory by memory, me becoming the woman that I needed, where I show up in my own mind with an army of me, and I rescue little me out of every single bad memory that I have. And I went through every single one, and it was a long log, and I rescued me out of every single one of them.
Yeah.
And something happened in those moments. Something happened in reality, in an intangible experience, that an abstract mind-based moment had tangible effects in reality because of what I did. I changed in real life because of visiting myself in my mind in different moments of my journey. And I don't think that this is something that doctors can speak to. I don't think it's something that you can collect data on and prove that this is something that is an effective tool or not. I can only go on personal experience. And I can only go on the experience of the individuals who I've gone on to work with, doing inner child practices and leading inner child workshops. And the tools that I use, I very clearly describe them. I articulate how to go in, what you have to do, the steps. And there is healing that comes as a result of these practices in all of the people. 100% track record of healing moments in real life, in tangible life, because of something that was resolved in the mind, which is beautiful. And I think for me, the biggest testament to that is my symptoms of bipolar, whether I have a brain for it on the scan or not. I did have the symptoms. The symptoms are gone. And that looks like I have no more hypersexuality. I've had sex between you and me and everyone listening. I've had sex one time in over a year. I used to have it 4 times a day or I was losing my mind. I have no more hypersexuality. I do not have I think there's like 7 symptoms. Hyperspending, hyperfrugality is the thing, this impulsivity, extreme irritability, agitation. I have an interesting sleep situation still. Insomnia is one of the things, which it also goes along with a lot of things. Insomnia is also a result of wiring in the child's brain when they grew up with trauma, because nighttime is very scary. But I have much better restful sleep. I used to have, wake up every 45 seconds and am I going to die? And I have restful periods of sleep. And then I have like a window in the middle, like the witching hour, where I wake up and I'm like, it's 3 a.m. again, everybody. But all of those things started to drop away when I went back to the root cause, which was this very traumatic early life. These memories that were in a bubble for 31 years, that bubble got popped and then they started to flood. And I started to flood my system with love over the last 3 years. And so there is definitely something there that we don't fully understand yet, I think. That's not necessarily measurable with the data that the way we measure data. But I would love to see more on that. It's just it's a hard sell. Walk into a science doctor community. Hey, so you want to measure love and see how well that works as a medicine?
But I think that's such a valid point in terms of, it's a very huge component. And it doesn't matter if you have a diagnosis or not. I think that healing process is an important journey for everyone to go on. But it's very hard to measure, as you said. And so there's not a lot of scientific research being done in terms of that as a treatment method. But I think it is very important. So yeah, thank you for touching on that.
Absolutely.
I guess kind of wrapping up, is there anything that you would like people to know about DID that you haven't mentioned, or what it means to live with? Or do you have any tips or whatnot for other people in terms of managing DID?
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate the question. If you are dealing with DID, first and foremost, I see you. I see you. I see that struggle. I see that uncertainty. I see that fear. I know it. I know it in such an intrinsic way. And I am sending all of the love in my heart to you as you either embark on your journey, as you discover more about what you're dealing with and how to cope with it. Ways that I really, really, really found healing. First, somatic experience must be a part of your self-treatment. It just must be a part of your self-care routine. And this goes for anyone, really, but especially if you are dealing with DID. If you are able to learn more about holotropic breathwork, it's spelled HOLOTROPIC, holotropic breathwork, pranayama, and sound baths, which is literally bathing your body, mind, soul in sound that has healing frequencies. You will release energy that has been stored in your body that's holding you back from being able to fully access parts of your healing on your journey. I can promise you, if you do this, this will have a profound effect on your life if you stick with it. So that is something you can do in the comfort of your own home. A lot of meditation companies, facilities who have gone virtual, one of which is called Unplug, that I go to all of their events online. They offer sound therapy. They offer breath work practices, coinciding that with whatever your doctor prescribes and whatever your doctor, whatever treatment you are doing with your doctor. And also asking yourself, why is this here? What is this protective mechanism about? Hello, little mechanism. Thank you for trying to protect me. Why are you here? From where did you originate? Where was the beginning of your need to really strongly, fiercely protect me? And thank you for that. But when did that start? And building a relationship with ourselves, however many selves we feel we have, is the most essential key. And no one teaches us this. No one teaches us that we have to have a relationship with ourselves. And this goes for every single person on the planet. We build a relationship with people that we work with, people that we interact with online, like people that we see at the Starbucks. But we wake up every morning with ourselves and we never check in and say, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What's this about? So I ask myself, why is this here? What is this moment about? Not a why me. Don't go victim-y on me. With kindness and graciousness, like a mom would ask, like, what is that, buddy? Why are you feeling that way? Why, where's your boo-boo? Why did that happen? Can I kiss it? With that nurturing, soothing energy that most of us are not taught. At least I wasn't. And asking why is this here? Where did it originate from? And what is this moment about? What is this protective identity about? What is she, he, they? What are they here to show us? You do that in any situation in your life, and I promise you're going to have a lot more of an understanding about yourself and how to navigate the world. I do it all the time. I do it mostly now when I'm frustrated or something, when I'm not vibing with somebody else. I'm like, what is it? What's going on inside of me that I'm getting this frustrated by you?
Yeah, that's a great exercise for anyone to do in terms of getting to the root of feelings that are coming up and whatnot. But great advice in terms of dealing with DID as well. So thank you so much, AnnaLynne, for being with us today and for sharing so openly about your experiences with DID. I learned a ton, and I think that our audience is going to find this very valuable too. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for asking me to come on, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day and happy holidays.
Well. Thank you. You too. So also just a quick, do you have any ways for people to follow more along with you or to hear more about your journey or whatnot?
Absolutely. So I am actually early days of a potential project centering around things like this, but I will be keeping everyone abreast of that on my social media platform. I'm on Instagram. It's at the AnnaLynne McCord, and anything that I'm doing, especially in regards to mental health, you can find on there. Also, if you check on my Instagram TV, like IGTV, you can see a lot of meditations that I've led. I've led some inner child practices that are really helpful for this work. So feel free to deep dive and stalk me on Instagram if you feel like it.
Awesome.
There's a lot of love there for you.
Cool.
Awesome.
We'll link to your Instagram in the description of this video. So thank you again so much, AnnaLynne. It was wonderful speaking with you, and take care.
Thanks, Lauren. It's wonderful speaking with you too. Bye.